No. In the 80s, he was just a rival.
Just a rival.
It was just competition.
Before they were linked by box office numbers and the label Action Legends, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis occupied overlapping territory in Hollywood that was far more competitive than it appeared on red carpets. To the public, they eventually looked like industry allies, co-owners of restaurants, collaborators, friendly veterans of the same explosive genre. But in the early days, when Willis began stepping into big-screen action roles, the atmosphere behind the scenes carried a different edge. Now, decades later, Schwarzenegger has reflected on that era with unusual honesty, not to tear down Willis, but to explain the mindset he carried into every rivalry. And to understand that mindset, you have to go back to a small Austrian village called Thal. Arnold Alois Schwarzenegger was born there on July 30th, 1947, into a country still recovering from the devastation of World War II. Thal may have looked picturesque, rolling hills, quiet roads, a tight-knit community. But life inside the Schwarzenegger household was defined by discipline, scarcity, and expectation. His father, Gustav Schwarzenegger, served as the local police chief. Like many Austrian men of his generation, Gustav had a military past tied to Nazi Germany, having joined the Nazi Party in 1938 and later served on the Eastern Front before being discharged in 1943 due to illness. That history cast a long shadow over the family. Gustav ran his home with the same rigidity he brought to uniformed service. Structure was absolute, emotion was restrained, approval was conditional. Arnold later described feeling that affection in the house was uneven. His older brother, Meinhard, appeared to receive more of their father's favor, while Arnold sensed he had to fight harder for validation. Whether rooted in personality differences or deeper insecurities, that imbalance left a mark. Arnold grew up determined to prove himself, not just to his father, but to the world. Financial hardship sharpened that hunger. The family did not live in luxury. Small purchases felt monumental. Schwarzenegger once recalled the excitement of finally getting a refrigerator, a detail that illustrates how modest their means were. In that environment, ambition wasn't encouraged softly. It was forged through pressure. Sports became his outlet. At first, it was soccer, a natural path in Europe. But at 13, everything changed when a coach introduced weight training. Arnold stepped into a gym and found something that felt like destiny. The weights didn't judge. They didn't play favorites. They responded only to effort. Within a year, bodybuilding eclipsed everything else. By 14, Arnold had decided he would become the greatest bodybuilder in the world. It sounded outrageous for a teenager from rural Austria, but to him it felt logical. Muscles meant strength meant control. Control meant freedom. His discipline bordered on obsession. If the gym was closed, he found a way inside. If others rested, he trained. At 18, he risked punishment by leaving mandatory Austrian military service without permission to compete in the Junior Mr. Europe contest. The risk didn't deter him. The goal outweighed the consequences. Losses came early. In 1966, he flew for the first time in his life to compete in London's Mr. Universe competition and lost to Chester Yorton. The defeat stung. But that trip changed everything. Judge Wag Bennett saw potential and offered mentorship, housing Arnold above his gym despite language barriers and limited money. In England, Schwarzenegger trained harder, learned faster, and studied his idol Reg Park. 1 year later, at just 20 years old, he became the youngest Mr. Universe champion in history. Victory validated the philosophy that had guided him since childhood: dominate or be dominated. That relentless mentality would later follow him to Hollywood, shaping not only his rise to stardom, but the quiet competitive tension that surfaced when another unlikely action hero, Bruce Willis, entered the arena. By the late 1960s, Arnold Schwarzenegger was no longer just a young Austrian bodybuilder with ambition. He was a rising international figure, learning how to balance fame, relationships, and the emotional weight of his past. In 1969, he entered his first serious relationship with Barbara Baker, an English teacher who later chronicled their time together in a memoir. At first, Arnold appeared unstoppable, charismatic, driven, and fresh off major bodybuilding victories. To Barbara, he seemed destined for extraordinary success, but as their relationship deepened, she noticed the steel beneath the charm. His ambition was relentless, and emotional vulnerability did not come naturally to him. He compartmentalized feelings the way he structured workouts, tightly controlled and rarely displayed. Then tragedy struck. In 1971, Arnold's older brother, Meinhard, died in a car accident after driving under the influence. Though the brothers had not been especially close, their father's favoritism had created distance. The loss shook Arnold deeply. Yet his response was characteristic, contained, internalized, disciplined. He did not return to Austria for the funeral, a decision shaped in part by his strained relationship with his father, Gustav Schwarzenegger. Gustav, a former police chief who had served in the German military during World War II and joined the Nazi Party in 1938, had ruled the household with rigid authority. Arnold grew up under strict discipline and frequent punishment, often feeling he had to compete for approval. That environment built resilience, but it also built emotional armor. Despite not attending his brother's funeral, Arnold quietly assumed responsibility for Meinhard's young son, Patrick. He helped fund his education and later supported his relocation to the United States, where Patrick eventually became a successful attorney. It was a private act of loyalty that contrasted sharply with Arnold's public image of cold ambition. Just 1 year later, in 1972, Gustav suffered a stroke and died at 65. Again, Arnold did not attend the funeral. Over time, he offered varying explanations, but the underlying reality remained. The emotional distance between father and son had never fully healed. Barbara later described Arnold's reaction to his father's death as outwardly detached, reinforcing the impression that he had chosen to focus forward rather than look back. Still, unresolved questions lingered. As his fame grew, Arnold became increasingly concerned about his father's wartime past. The possibility that Gustav might have been linked to atrocities weighed heavily on him. Determined to know the truth, Arnold requested that the Simon Wiesenthal Center investigate his father's military record. The findings brought partial relief. While Gustav had indeed been a Nazi Party member and served in the Wehrmacht, no evidence connected him directly to war crimes. The conclusion eased Arnold's fears, but it could not erase the harsh upbringing that shaped his psychology. Instead of allowing that past to limit him, Arnold transformed it into fuel. The discipline, the pressure, the emotional restraint all became tools. He transitioned from bodybuilding to acting with the same single-minded intensity. Hollywood did not embrace him immediately. His accent, physique, and unconventional presence were seen as obstacles. But persistence defined him. In 1982, Conan the Barbarian established him as a viable leading man. The breakthrough expanded with Conan the Destroyer. Then came the role that altered action cinema, in The Terminator, directed by James Cameron. Interestingly, Arnold was initially considered for the role of Kyle Reese, but during discussions, Cameron recognized something unique in him, an imposing physical stillness and mechanical intensity that fit the cyborg assassin perfectly. Schwarzenegger even debated the now iconic line, "I'll be back," preferring a more robotic phrasing. Cameron insisted, Arnold delivered it, and history was made. By the mid-1980s, Schwarzenegger had become the prototype for the modern action hero. But as his dominance grew, another unconventional action star was about to emerge, one who didn't rely on massive biceps or a foreign mystique. And that arrival would quietly shift the balance in Hollywood's action hierarchy. By the mid-1980s, Arnold Schwarzenegger was no longer just a bodybuilder turned actor. He was the action star. After The Terminator, his screen presence became synonymous with power, spectacle, and one-liners that echoed through pop culture. "I'll be back" wasn't just dialogue anymore. It was a brand. But dominance in Hollywood rarely goes uncontested. As Arnold's career soared, he found himself in a very public rivalry with Sylvester Stallone. Stallone had already cemented his place with Rocky and Rambo, and the two quickly became the twin pillars of 1980s action cinema. The competition wasn't subtle. Each new film seemed bigger than the last. Larger explosions, heavier weapons, higher body counts, more outrageous stunts. The media loved it. Fans picked sides. Studios leaned into the narrative. Arnold later admitted that the rivalry wasn't just accidental, it was strategic. In one now famous example, when Stallone inquired about the script for Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot, Arnold pretended he was interested, knowing Stallone's competitive instincts might push him toward the role. Stallone took it. The film flopped. Years later, Stallone openly called it one of his worst career decisions. Arnold acknowledged the maneuver with a grin, describing it as part of the chess game they were playing at the time. Yet rivalry sharpened both of them. It elevated the genre. Every release felt like another round in a heavyweight bout, and audiences benefited from the escalation. But while the action wars played out on screen, Arnold's ambitions were quietly expanding beyond Hollywood. By the late 1990s, he had already conquered bodybuilding and cinema. Marriage to Maria Shriver connected him to one of America's most prominent political families. The son of a strict Austrian policeman was now orbiting the Kennedy legacy. The transformation was extraordinary. Then, in 2003, during an appearance on The Tonight Show starring Jay Leno, Arnold delivered a shock. He was running for governor of California. The announcement came during a historic recall effort against Governor Gray Davis. The election was chaotic, crowded with 135 candidates. Critics mocked the idea. A movie star with a thick accent running the world's fifth largest economy? To many, it sounded absurd. But Arnold had built his life on achieving what others called unrealistic. He campaigned differently. He leaned into charisma, rather than policy minutiae. He participated in minimal debates and relied on mass appeal. His fame ensured constant media coverage. When the votes were counted, Arnold won with 48.6%, defeating his closest rival by more than 1 million votes. The Terminator had become the Governator. Yet politics brought scrutiny unlike anything Hollywood had delivered. Allegations of past inappropriate behavior surfaced just days before the election. Arnold issued a public apology, acknowledging he had sometimes behaved poorly in the past while disputing elements of the claims. Other controversies, including past marijuana use shown in pumping iron, resurfaced. But voters appeared focused on reform and leadership rather than scandal. He took office. Then, in 2004, something unexpected happened. While vacationing in Hawaii, Arnold spotted a swimmer in distress several hundred yards offshore. Without hesitation, he grabbed a boogie board and paddled out, helping guide the exhausted man safely back to land. It was a surreal image, the world-famous action hero performing a real-life rescue. The story spread quickly. It reinforced the persona he had cultivated for decades: strength, decisiveness, action under pressure. But as Arnold was solidifying his second act in politics, another unconventional action star was rising. Not muscle-bound, not sculpted like a comic book warrior, but sharp, sarcastic, and undeniably magnetic. And that man was Bruce Willis. Their paths were about to collide in a way that would quietly redefine what an action hero could be. As governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger quickly demonstrated that he wouldn't fit neatly into ideological boxes. Though elected as a Republican, many of his positions were moderate and, at times, socially liberal. He supported abortion rights, voiced support for same-sex marriage, and even officiated a same-sex wedding while in office. Moves that surprised both critics and party hardliners. His governing style blended fiscal conservatism with socially centrist policies, allowing him to appeal to independents and moderate Democrats in heavily blue California. Many initially dismissed his candidacy as a celebrity experiment that wouldn't last. Instead, in 2006, he won re-election with nearly 60% of the vote, a remarkable margin in a state that had consistently favored Democratic presidential candidates for years. Comparisons to Ronald Reagan followed, another actor who successfully transitioned into political leadership. Arnold also drew attention for declining his gubernatorial salary of approximately $175,000 per year, stating he didn't need the income after decades in film. Symbolically, it reinforced his image as someone serving out of purpose rather than necessity. But political careers are rarely defined only by victories. In the final hours of his governorship, Arnold made a decision that ignited fierce backlash. He commuted the sentence of Esteban Núñez, who had been convicted of involuntary manslaughter and originally sentenced to 16 years in prison. Arnold reduced the sentence to 7 years. The controversy intensified when it became widely known that Esteban Núñez was the son of Fabian Núñez, former Speaker of the California Assembly and a political ally of Arnold. Critics argued the decision reflected favoritism. The victim's family, particularly the relatives of Luis Santos, expressed devastation, learning of the commutation through media reports rather than direct notification. Though a reviewing judge described the decision as troubling, the court ultimately ruled that the governor had clear constitutional authority to grant commutations. Legally permissible did not mean politically painless. The episode became one of the most damaging marks on Arnold's record. Yet, an even more personal crisis was looming. In 2011, shortly after leaving office, Arnold and Maria Shriver announced the end of their 25-year marriage. At first, speculation swirled without clarity. Then, the truth emerged. Arnold had fathered a child years earlier with the family's longtime housekeeper, Mildred Baena. The revelation stunned the public and deeply hurt Maria. Their son, Joseph Baena, had been born in October 1997, just days after Maria gave birth to their son Christopher. For years, Joseph's paternity remained hidden. As he grew older, however, his resemblance to Arnold became increasingly unmistakable. Arnold later stated he disclosed the truth after leaving office, but reports indicated Maria had already confronted Baena and uncovered the reality herself. The scandal dismantled the carefully maintained image of family stability that had accompanied Arnold's political career. The exposure also reignited discussion of past relationships, including an affair with Brigitte Nielsen during the filming of Red Sonja, at a time when Arnold was already involved with Maria. Arnold later acknowledged the relationship in his autobiography, admitting to a pattern of poor decisions and denial. The scandal damaged his reputation significantly. For a man who had built his life on discipline and control, the exposure of long-hidden secrets was a humbling reckoning. In interviews, Arnold admitted that avoidance and compartmentalization had allowed him to delay consequences, but never escape them. And while Arnold was navigating the fallout of political controversy and personal scandal, another action legend was facing a very different battle, one that would shift public perception from rivalry to respect. Because as Bruce Willis's health challenges later came to light, the quiet rivalry between two action titans would transform into something far more human. Arnold Schwarzenegger's life has always reflected a powerful contradiction: unmatched discipline in public, complicated vulnerability in private. Those closest to him often described the same pattern. Former partner Barbara Baker spoke about his intense self-focus, a man driven by goals so clearly defined that emotional nuance sometimes fell aside. Ambition, for Arnold, was oxygen. Everything else often adjusted around it. Maria Shriver experienced that dynamic firsthand throughout their marriage. The affairs were the most visible fractures, but there were deeper patterns of unilateral decision-making. In 1997, when Arnold required open-heart surgery to replace a defective valve, he initially tried to handle the matter quietly, rather than immediately confiding in Maria. Years later, when he chose to run for governor of California, he informed her only days before publicly announcing his candidacy. The life-altering decision stunned her, pulling their family into relentless political scrutiny overnight. Arnold's story is extraordinary, a boy from Thal, Austria, who conquered bodybuilding, Hollywood, and politics. But it is also a story shaped by emotional compartmentalization. The same iron will that built empires often created distance at home. His legacy is neither simple nor one-dimensional. It is a blend of groundbreaking achievement and deeply human missteps. And then there was Bruce Willis. At 78, Arnold has spoken with new candor about the quiet rivalry that once existed between them. Before becoming action icons of the same era, they represented two different archetypes of heroism. Bruce Willis didn't enter Hollywood through brute force. He rose through television, most notably starring in Moonlighting in the mid-1980s, where he displayed sharp comedic timing and dramatic depth. When the role of John McClane in Die Hard emerged, the industry envisioned a larger-than-life action star, the kind Arnold embodied. The role was first contractually offered to Frank Sinatra, who declined. Studios then approached heavyweights including Arnold himself, Sylvester Stallone, Burt Reynolds, and Harrison Ford. One by one, they passed. Arnold, seeking to diversify, chose to pursue comedy with twins instead. That decision cleared the lane for Willis and reshaped the action genre forever. When Die Hard released in 1988, it redefined what an action hero could look like. Willis's John McClane wasn't invincible. He was bruised, bleeding, exhausted, frightened, and human. The vulnerability resonated. Audiences saw themselves in him. Arnold later admitted that at the time, there had been skepticism. The action world equated physical dominance with credibility. But success has a way of settling debates. Die Hard became a phenomenon. Willis became a global icon. The rivalry softened into mutual respect. Over the years, Arnold publicly praised Willis, calling him one of Hollywood's most significant stars. They would eventually share the screen in the Expendables franchise, a symbolic union of action legends who once competed for dominance. Then, life shifted again. In March 2022, Willis's family announced he had been diagnosed with aphasia, later updated in 2023 to frontotemporal dementia. The news reframed everything. Competition faded. Legacy remained. Arnold expressed admiration and support, honoring Willis not just as an action star, but as a colleague and friend. Two men who once represented competing versions of strength now stand as reminders of something deeper. Invincibility is cinematic. Humanity is real. Bruce Willis changed action films by proving heroes don't have to be flawless to be unforgettable. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, after decades of rivalry and reinvention, now speaks not as a competitor, but as a witness to a legacy that reshaped Hollywood forever.